turns out we've been telling the same 7 stories for thousands of years, and we're somehow still not tired of them. According to Christopher Booker's narrative theory of the 7 basic plots, nearly every story will fit into one of just 7 categories. I'm an editor who's worked on hundreds of books over my career, so I've seen these 7 plots over and over and over again. Today, I'm going to define each one of them, give you some contemporary examples, and the fun part, rank them from worst to best in my opinion. Let's figure out which plot your story fits into and if you agree with my rankings. Quick note, many stories will be a blend of multiple plots, so don't worry if your story doesn't fit neatly into just one category. Without further ado, coming in last place is a pick that might be controversial. The Voyage and Return. This is a story where the protagonist ventures into a strange, unfamiliar world. In it, they face hardship and challenges that force them to grow and change, and then they come home transformed. This plot goes way, way back. Homer's Odyssey is the quintessential ancient example, and a perfect contemporary example would be The Hobbit. Bilbo must leave the comfort and safety of his hobbit hole in the Shire to join 13 dwarves on a quest to reclaim their homeland and its treasure. After facing trolls, goblins, giant spiders, the dragon Smaug, and his own moral dilemmas, he returns back home forever changed by the journey. Just like the name says, he voyages and he returns. All the plots we'll go over today can apply to any genre, but some are more well suited to certain genres over others. The Voyage and Return plot is especially common in fantasy and sci-fi stories because you're pushing your protagonist into a new world that they must navigate. So why did I rank it last? Don't get me wrong, I don't at all hate The Hobbit or hate this plotline in general. It can be incredibly emotionally moving when done well. But to me personally, it can sometimes feel a bit overly simplistic. And the arc is so familiar that it can be stale and predictable. You don't want the reader to feel like the voyage is dragging on and on and on without any payoff. If you have this type of story, I'd recommend complicating the return part of it. Rather than your protagonist being welcomed home with open arms, what if their homeland has changed beyond recognition? Or perhaps they can't return home, forcing them to reckon with their sense of belonging even after what they thought was the hard part of their journey is over. We see a version of this in The Hobbit, where Bilbo's family presumed he was dead and is selling off his belongings, which makes his return bittersweet. The next plot in my ranking is one that you'll recognize from many fairy tales, Rags to Riches. You might think you know this plot in and out. After all, it's all in the name. But riches in this case doesn't actually have to be financial. In this plot, the protagonist starts off downtrodden or struggling in some way. Yes, they could be financially insecure, but they could also be a misfit at school, in their job, or in their social circle. Then they acquire the thing that they want, whether that's wealth or power or love. Typically, they'll come to a point where they lose or nearly lose everything that they've gained before earning it back. A great contemporary example of this plot is Slumdog Millionaire, where a boy from the slums of Mumbai wins a game show and reunites with the girl he loves. The reason this plot has endured is because we love rooting for the underdog. We probably all feel like underdogs in some capacity, so we want to see someone beat the odds, especially when they're stacked against them unjustly. The rags to riches structure pops up all the time in coming-of-age novels, family dramas, and romances especially. So why did I rank it so low on my list? Because sometimes the character's acquisition of their riches can feel a bit unbelievable and far-fetched. And sometimes putting so much emphasis on their external material gains neglects exploring the deeper internal layers of their story that also need attention. So if you're writing this type of story, make sure that your character earns their rise. And once they get there, show us how it tests them. What new problems arise for them now that they've gotten what they've always wanted? Do they even start to regret it? I'm a huge believer that strong writers don't just know sentence-level craft, but also storytelling mechanics at large. But how do you learn something as complex and nuanced as storytelling? There's actually a platform you can join to do exactly that, Skillshare, who was kind enough to sponsor today's video. Skillshare has an entire library of classes dedicated to creative writing, including this Storytelling 101 class I took from Daniel Jose Older, who's a New York Times best-selling author and a lead story architect for the Star Wars The High Republic series. It felt like having my own personal writing mentor, and hearing how an expert approaches and conceptualizes things like character building and conflict allowed me to sharpen my own storytelling skills and vocabulary that I can bring to my work with authors. Skillshare's creative classes are taught by amazing, world-class creatives, including the authors behind some of your favorite books. If you're ready to level up as a storyteller, this might be the boost you need to finally complete your manuscript with clarity and confidence. Great news! The first 500 people to use the link in the description or scan this QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare plus 20% off their first payment. This offer is only available for a limited time, so get started today and let me know what story you end up working on. This next plot is a classic, especially in sci-fi and fantasy epics, The Quest. In this type of story, the hero receives some call to adventure, gathers his allies, and then must navigate treacherous terrain to achieve some kind of goal, whether it's to retrieve a specific object or get to a particular location. Along the way, the group faces many trials, setbacks, and temptations. For a textbook example of a quest plot, let's look at Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief. Percy discovers he's a demigod, then gets blamed for stealing Zeus's lightning bolt. He and his friends must retrieve it and discover who the true thief is to prevent war from breaking out. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the hero has a clear mission with a ticking clock. This combination means that quest storylines are often naturally propulsive, but the reason they aren't ranked higher on my personal list is because they can sometimes fall into the trap of prioritizing plot at the expense of character. The focus naturally falls on what's happening externally, everything the hero needs to find, fight, and survive. But the most successful quest novels also take care to develop the hero's internal journey. Sometimes I also find that quest plots have a large ensemble of characters, sidekicks, secondary characters, villain after villain after villain, which can lead to the story feeling overcrowded and scattered. So if you're writing a quest story, look out for opportunities to streamline and make sure that each and every character earns their place. This next plot plays into our primal human need to see conflict play out, overcoming the monster. In this plot, the protagonist must confront a powerful, threatening force, sometimes a literal monster, sometimes a symbolic one. The monster could be a dangerous creature, an oppressive system, a villain, or even nature itself. What I love about overcoming the monster plots is that they automatically have two key elements of effective storytelling: high stakes and conflict. There is clearly something on the line for the protagonist, and there will be severe consequences if they don't win their battle against the literal or figurative monster. One example of this plot that you might not automatically think of is The Martian. In this story, an astronaut wakes up on Mars completely alone and has to find a way to survive the unthinkable conditions. You might be thinking, but wait, where's the monster? There isn't a physical one in this story because Mars itself serves as the monster. The astronaut has to use his scientific skills and ingenuity to survive the harshest conditions: the brutal climate, the lack of resources, the complete and utter loneliness. The best overcoming the monster plots don't just feature a black and white, good versus evil dynamic, but force the protagonist to face their own flaws, fears, and moral conflicts. The monster holds up a mirror, revealing to the hero what they must overcome within themselves to win the fight. Now on to my top 3 favorite plots. The next one is often misunderstood: comedy. Comedies in the context of these 7 basic plots aren't really about being laugh-out-loud funny. They're about chaos, confusion, misunderstanding. After a lot of drama, the truth spills out, the protagonist finds clarity, and we get a happy ending. Most romances would be considered comedies, as would some women's fiction. We often see tension between family members or loved ones spiraling into mayhem and building up an emotional crescendo where relationships reach their breaking point. Then, in the end, we get a satisfying reconciliation. One of my favorite contemporary rom-coms is Crazy Rich Asians. In it, an economics professor travels with her boyfriend to Singapore to attend a wedding where she discovers he and his family are incredibly wealthy. His mother vehemently disapproves of their relationship, and she must navigate the pressures of his community, culture, and family. Comedies are often funny, yes, but they're also full of heart and emotional truth. They reflect real-life chaos and how messy our relationships can be, and then they deliver the thing we all crave in our own lives. resolution, and joy. They're your classic feel-good stories, the ones you know will warm your heart, and sometimes we all need a dose of that. My second most favorite plot might not be one that immediately comes to mind, but it's extremely powerful. Rebirth. This plot is all about internal transformation. The protagonist experiences a series of events that force them to undergo profound change, to let go of who they were and be reborn as someone new entirely. The events of the story force them into an entirely new worldview, perspective, or sense of self. These stories speak to our universal desire to start over, to shed old versions of ourselves and evolve for the better. What I love most about the Rebirth plot is that it doesn't just rely on external action. It focuses on the protagonist's inward journey, and as a character-driven reader, I'm always looking to emotionally connect with the protagonist. This plot can be applied to any genre, but is perhaps most prominent in coming-of-age stories and memoirs. A good example would be the breakout memoir Educated. The author, Tara Westover, grew up in an isolated survivalist family and was denied a formal education. The memoir details her journey to pursue education on her own, eventually going on to receive a PhD from Cambridge. As she disentangles herself from her family and reclaims agency, she is reborn and paves a new life for herself. Rebirth stories like this ask, what does the protagonist have to lose to become who they're meant to be? And finally, we've reached my number one pick. It's my favorite type of story because it sits with you long after you finish reading. Tragedy. As a lover of thrillers, it's only natural that I would pick the darkest type of plot as my top choice. In a tragedy, the protagonist is brought down by their own flaws. There's no triumphant ending. We see them fall from grace where they're forced to live with the dark consequences of their choices. Tragedies are so powerful because they offer catharsis. They build up our emotions, then the devastating conclusion releases all our pent-up pity and fear that we feel for the characters. There's something strangely comforting in watching characters fall. It reminds us that we're not alone in our own failures. At the same time, tragedies invite us to probe into the parts of ourselves we don't always want to see. As such, they tend to match up with darker genres like thrillers, psychological suspense, and horror. Frankenstein is a perfect example of a tragedy and is one of my absolute favorite novels. It's also top of mind as I just watched the Guillermo del Toro rendition, which was incredible. Victor Frankenstein is completely undone by his own ambition to create life. At first, he presents as a brilliant scientist, but quickly his passion project spirals into obsession and madness. And then, when he realizes the creature he created is out of his control, the damage becomes irreversible. He loses his loved ones and his sanity. Both the creator and the creation are left emotionally devastated. Tragedies often play out our worst-case scenarios. They promise an unhappy ending and leave us sitting in the wreckage, asking what it all meant. And those uncomfortable questions are exactly what make them so unforgettable and rich for discussion. So, do you agree with my rankings? Let me know in the comments how you would rank these 7 basic plots and which one is closest to the story you're writing. But remember that even if you have an incredible plot, your story won't land if readers can't connect to your protagonist. So watch this video where I reveal 9 mistakes that make readers hate your main character. Thanks so much for watching and happy writing.